we talked, you and I talked on my show about there being watershed incidents, in law enforcement, in any profession, but in law enforcement, there's things like the FBI Miami shootout, where they were
Hmm.
shooting revolvers. And part of the reason some of those agents died is because they were trained to they were just carrying 38 revolvers. They would dump their spent brass into their non-dominant or their dominant hand, put it in their pocket, then reload. They found brass in their pockets for these dead agents. The Newhall incident in California with the CHP, where one responding officer after another ends up getting shot and killed. Columbine. Uh, Uvalde will go down in history as a watershed event. And my hope is that this, the shame being heaped upon, especially the leadership down there, will get the attention of any agency who is unprepared, or any administrator who is cowardly or worried about liability or whatever it was that prevented them from doing it. Hopefully, those few people in leadership positions, or those few officers who haven't had that conversation that I referenced earlier, will have that conversation. Those leaders will make a decision and steel their resolve and stiffen their spine to the point where this never ever happens again. There's John and I cover a lot of videos on the channel, and I think people were surprised to hear me, a career law enforcement officer who's retired, be critical, very critical of officers and deputies in some of these videos. The vast majority of the videos we cover that are law enforcement, the outcome is just. It isn't always good. Sometimes somebody gets shot or killed, or someone commits suicide by cop. But the vast majority of them, the outcome is justified.
Right.
And on the few occasions when it's not, I will absolutely call that officer or those officers out. There was a case in Georgia that was a mess. There was one case with a guy was trying to commit suicide by cop, and the officer, everything he did leading up to shooting the guy was wrong, tactically wrong. And then him shooting the guy, really, I don't think was really justified. And then after he shot the guy, he stood there frozen, not lending aid, not calling for EMS, and a female officer had to come in and handle all that business for him. I say all that to say this. If you're out there watching this and you're watching this coverage and you are in law enforcement, whether it's leadership or a line officer or a tactician or whatever the case may be, you need to make that decision now. You're not going to rise to the occasion. You're not going to rise to the moment of truth. You're going to rise to the level of your commitment to protect your community and your training. And that's all there is to it. There's no other ingredient there that we need to talk about. And hopefully this will be that watershed that will prevent this from ever happening again, because, I have a lot of pride in my law enforcement career. I'm very proud of what I did. I'm generally very proud of law enforcement in general. I'm a little less proud today. That's a little diminished. And I hate to say that, because, we talk about LE in the United States. What do you see on TV in LE encounters? The ones that go poorly, the ones where the cop does something wrong. And meanwhile, there's 4 million encounters every day that go swimmingly and they never make the news. This is not that. This is a huge black eye for law enforcement. And I really hope that this doesn't ever happen again, because all eyes are on this right now. There's nobody in any law enforcement capacity in the U.S. who hasn't heard about this and isn't thinking these thoughts in his or her head. Like, that needs to not be me. If this happens again and I'm nearby and I can help, I need to get in there and do what I got to do and get to work and end the threat.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just sad because like a lot of those other scenarios you mentioned, that was the first time, right, where those mistakes have been made. And now this one just feels like a repeat.
Right.
Like we learned these lessons 20 years ago in over 20 years ago, 1999 during Columbine, right? We learned it to some degree again in Parkland. Now that's one officer choosing not to intervene. Perhaps he just lost his nerve. This was Columbine and Uvalde were systemic problems. The whole system didn't work. And it's just sad because I think you're right. I mean, I think it'll have certainly an effect on law enforcement and potential responses to active shooter situations in the future. But I mean, it's hard because most of the time, as we've been talking about here, most police officers and most police departments respond correctly to these situations. They might not be able to do anything, unfortunately, to affect the outcome in all cases because of how quickly these shootings can go down, frankly,
right,
before police can respond to them. I mean, that's true, right, of most violent attacks. Police are generally, as you mentioned earlier in the show, responsive. They're coming in after the fact They're not proactive because that's the nature of policing. Like, you're not going to always have police on the scene when somebody attacks you. That's something that you guys cover quite well over at the Active Self-Protection channel, and also on the podcast, discussing different people's experiences with self-defense situations. But it's a key principle that's been reinforced, unfortunately, again. But it's one of those things where we didn't need the lesson again, right? We shouldn't, and that's what makes it all the worse, right?
Right. So, I mean, at some point, we need to have a discussion as a country about how we're going to make these schools safer, how we're going to harden them, how we're going to protect them. It's I don't remember who said the quote, but parents are perfectly fine, teachers are perfectly fine with having sprinkler systems, fire extinguishers, and fire alarms, and doing fire drills in case there's a fire. I don't remember the last time I heard about a major fire at a school. I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things. We absolutely should do those things, but we as a country need to have a conversation. There seems like there's people who say arm every single teacher and the custodian and the bus driver, and make it into basically a prison, lock all the doors, put up barbed wire. That's never going to work, and it's never going to happen. On the other side, the only thing I really heard from sort of the anti-gun side is, let's ban all the guns. I got news for you, folks. That's never, ever, ever going to happen. They could possibly try to ban all future sales of all kinds of guns, and that's all well and good. There's more guns than people in this country. So taking the guns out of the equation just it's never going to work. It's never going to be the answer. I did a Facebook post a while back, and I have a lot of friends who are left of center, and I love them to tears. We believe at ASK, we believe that self-defense is for everybody, not just for Republicans or Democrats or Libertarians. Self-defense is for everybody, and that includes schools. What I said in that post was, we got more guns than people. So if you want to ban all guns and cop scale guns, play that out in your head. It's like an Alcoholics Anonymous trope, let's play that out in your head. If you decide to ban all future sales and start confiscating guns, how's that going to work out? It's going to be terrible. You're going to have massive shootouts constantly. It's not a feasible solution. Therefore, since we're going to always have guns, banning guns is not possibly going to work. We need to come up with practical, common sense solutions. I'm a retired federal agent. I'm a retired firearms instructor. I've been shot at before. I've been very close to shooting. If you've never been off a range and heard gunshots, especially rifle or shotgun shots in the wild, get your attention very quickly. And you'll know very quickly if you have the intestinal fortitude to move forward and do what you have to do, because it's pretty overwhelming. So I would like to see something like people like me, or off-duty cops, or even citizen defenders who go through some sort of training class or whatever. I would volunteer in a heartbeat. I would volunteer to go 5 days a week if necessary, or take turns just being at a school, being in elementary school or a high school. And nobody needs to know who I am. The students don't need to know who I am, only the staff. And if not that, if we're going to arm somebody in the school, I know there's a lot of opposition to that, but for me, I feel like having an armed staff member, doesn't have to be a teacher, it could be anybody, it could be the custodian, it could be a vice principal. And the only person who knows that person is armed is that person. They don't, the gun's never seen, no one knows about it. It's very quiet. They get the training they need. And it at least gives the people in that school a fighting chance, because, you mentioned earlier, it's a cliche, but it's true. When seconds count, the police are minutes away. If you're in a personal self-defense encounter, it's going to be over before the police get there. You're your own rescue party. There's no one coming to save you, really. Not so much in an active shooter, but if there's someone there that can at least put up a fight. What did you say earlier? The other guy, as soon as the police came in, he shot himself. Like you said, it's a frequent response of these cowards. They're not planning on any resistance. They're planning on murdering little kids, and no one's going to fight back. And I'm just going to create this bloodbath. And they've been over this fantasy over and over in their head. The second the police show up, frequently the person kills himself. When that shooting gallery becomes a two-way range for the suspect, that can change his demeanor. It can change his decision-making process. It may mean he's not going to shoot any more kids because now he's concentrated on you instead. And that's okay.